everyone, welcome to the Blue Sky Studios podcast. I'm so glad you are listening today. We have a wonderful guest here, Melissa Boswell Townsend. Melissa, thanks so much for being with me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And please forgive my sinuses. I sound like a really mellow Barry White today. I apologize. It is cold and flu season, and I have been a victim. So, Melissa, tell us a little bit about yourself and what Boswell Media does.
Well, absolutely. I am the owner and general manager here at Boswell Media. We have radio stations. So we operate 3 FM stations that cover central Mississippi. My grandfather actually started our company 60 years ago. So we just celebrated our 60th anniversary of broadcasting for the Boswell family. So that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And take us back kind of to the origins. I would love to hear how he got into radio and how that's evolved over the years.
Oh, absolutely. The first radio station in Kosciuszko, where we're headquartered, was put on the air in 1947 as an AM station. A man named Cy Bayhackle put it on the air. My grandfather worked for Mr. Bayhackle.
Cy Bayhackle, what a name.
So he owned was part owner of the Charlotte Hornets. Is it the North Carolina?
Wow. Okay.
So he became like a crazy, media Mongol, if you will. But he was from Kosciuszko, and he put his first station on the air here, and it was actually located downtown on the square. And my grandfather bought it in 1962. And then in the 70s, put an FM station on that in the early 90s, moved to Jackson and sold it. But long story short, between my grandfather, my father, and I, we've been running our broadcast company for a little over 60 years now.
That's awesome. And so tell our listeners those stations and the genre of music that they play.
Absolutely. We have Kicks 96, which is a country, like a mainstream country station. We don't play the really, really hot stuff. We might play like one hot thing an hour, but we got a lot of the good, early 2000s, 90s, 80s, just like some of the greatest music. And I love it.
You're talking my language now, Melissa.
Oh, yeah. So I just love that stuff. I listen to it all the time. And then we have an adult contemporary station, Breezy 101, and an oldies station, Cruisin' 98.
That's awesome. So, Melissa, I've got to stop right here because I know our listeners are thinking this. What role does radio still play in an average artist's life? So if they're not, John Mayer's great, but he's not listening to this podcast more than likely.
Right. For
the average artist, how does radio play a role in their career?
It has really changed over the years because back, 20 or 30 years ago, in order for anybody to hear your music, you had to be on the radio. And I was having a conversation with a fellow producer, Marty Gamblin, the other day, and we were talking about when he founded Alan Jackson and Brian White, he would call my dad, or even Marty Stewart, and he would call my dad and was like, "Hey, these artists are great. Please play their songs on your station." And we did, of course, and all those artists became somebody, which was really, really cool. I was actually in the studio the first time Brian White ever sang on the radio.
No way.
It was live on our station, K105 at the time, kicking K105. But as far as still playing a role, it's like you finally have arrived when your music is, actually playing on the radio, because anybody that's technologically inept in some way can figure out how to get them on all these streaming platforms. But that's not the case in radio. So that's what makes us so different. It has to go down like a pipeline, and people really have to see this as a quality product. Not just any music is going to be played on the radio. So that's the difference, I would think, within just how radio is still such a popular vehicle to get your music out there, because it's a trusted vehicle. If somebody hears a song on the radio, they're thinking, okay, there's a reason it's playing here and not just on a streaming platform.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, one of the things we hear a lot is the word syndication. What does that mean? And can you explain that for our listeners?
So syndication means like one show played on multiple radio stations, like, John Boy and Billy, or those like morning shows, syndicated shows. We operate a broadcast company that is all localized. So all the content is generated from this building and through the communities that we serve. So nothing that we have is syndicated. We are a member of a network that provides us our music library. And so we have a mainstream country station, and our music library comes from a network called local radio networks. But as far as any syndication, we do not do that because it's so important for us in radio to be local. And that's why where Mississippi Songwriter of the Year evolved is because we wanted to keep the roots we have here in Mississippi is just incredible and keep growing them and producing new artists.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit later in the show about Mississippi Songwriter of the Year. I'm anxious to hear and explore that a little bit and how that impacts Mississippians. So let me just ask the question that a lot of people are probably thinking. We've kind of naturally moved there. How do we get on radio as a local artist?
That is a great question and almost kind of hard for me to answer because so many artists will send you stuff. And, I've learned, some things you get are great and some things you're not. But staying connected with your local radio station and becoming trusted by the station because our standards are high and we don't just allow anything on there. And kind of moving into where Mississippi Songwriter of the Year comes in, that's one thing that we started doing in order to get these artists on the radio. And when you are in that competition and you win, we send your music out to as many radio stations as we can. And so that is kind of a little bit of an interesting question because it's kind of, if it's an independent station, like independent broadcasters like we are, we can choose what we want to do. But so many broadcast companies and radio stations are now owned by large entities and it's not as easy.
And how much does the role of having a good story play to radio?
Oh, that is what radio is storytelling. And it's like almost performing the magic. We're the people behind the curtain, making it all look good and sound good. And so it is. It is because radio is playing as the mind thing. Is audio only, which is what's so cool because you can take a video or watching anything that you have a visual image and an audio image and close your eyes. And if the story is still that good, that visual image never goes away. And so that's what radio does. It is used as it's very creative. And the storytelling is just we do all that with even all our advertising that we do. We make sure you're seeing and you're smelling and tasting or whatever we're trying to sell, the product that we're trying to sell. So.
And I think that's a good segue into the next thing. And it's maybe more of a point if you want to add to it. But a lot of times I've heard artists become frustrated, like they just won't play my music. And I think at the end of the day, it's important for artists to remember where you're coming from, Melissa, that you guys have to pay the bills. And you do that through advertising. So if your song isn't good enough, if your song is just not a good fit genre-wise for the audience listening, if they're going to bounce off that radio station, Melissa and her team can't pay the bills to keep the lights on. And so keep that in mind as you're making music, as you're pitching your music to different people. Anything to add to that, Melissa? I think that sometimes is forgotten a little bit.
Well, I get a lot of emails. An email's not good enough.
What do you mean? Unpack that a little bit more.
Okay. Sending me an email. I get emails all the time from here's a new song from so-and-so artist. Here's a new song from so-and-so artist. What people are going to listen to is people's names they recognize. So have you been a part of the radio station or do they know who you are? Another thing, I know a lot of songwriters, and if some of them send us stuff, I'm going to stop and listen to their stuff. But then there's a lot of people that I'm not going to. Just because you sent me an email does not mean it's going to get listened to. More than likely, if I've never heard of you, it won't get listened to. But if you contacted the radio station and wanted to talk to one of my jocks or you came in here, we have people come in all the time and play live on the air, which is super, super cool. We love doing it. And we're always welcoming people. But make sure if you're contacting a country radio station and you're sending them your music, that your music is in that line, that is in that format. If this is country, if you send me a rap song, I'm not playing it on my country station. And a lot of people just send them out to radio stations without doing your research of what that station is or who those people are. So you have to do your research. You have to know who you're talking to, know who the decision person is, know who the production managers are, and that can actually take it and move it from an email to on air.
Yeah, that's such great advice, Melissa. Thank you so much. I know that there are people clapping right now, listening to this podcast. That was incredible advice. Context is certainly everything. So over the years, I know you've heard some bad pitches and some good pitches. If you don't mind, without naming the artist, do any memorable bad pitches come to mind, and specifically what they did wrong? And if it's funny, even better. And then I'm going to ask you the flip side in a second.
Yes, as we get submissions for new songs, especially in the spring, we open up our application process for Mississippi Songwriter of the Year. And it's funny because whoever opens the email first and listens to the song, we can almost tell with their reaction. And we have had some very racy stuff sent to us. We've had stuff that you really couldn't understand what they were saying. And, just because it's your idea is not necessarily a good idea for everybody, but I don't want to ever not encourage the creative process. But it does need to fit in the line of what you're trying to accomplish as an artist. So we have had everything you can ever imagine.
I don't know why, but for some reason people enjoy I would call it abusing the Blue Sky voicemail. So a lot of times people leave us voicemails of performances and stuff. And I'm like, not the format, not the format, not the format. Like, come on, think about what you're doing. People are funny.
Well, one thing that we're really going to start trying to do more in our initiative is try to teach people the songwriting and how, what's the word I'm looking for? The elements that you must have in order for a song to be heard. Because what's so interesting is when somebody is judging your song, you only have about 60 seconds. All the other stuff that comes after 60 seconds, if it's heard, it's because your first 60 seconds sold it. But if your first 60 seconds is not going to sell it, whatever else, don't put your good stuff in last. And don't have a 60-second instrumental intro, because the first 60 seconds is vital.
So on that, I know there's so much of a good song or songwriting that's just intangible. It's hard to describe, but there are threads that just make a song stand out. Any tips for songwriters, like to make that first 60 seconds matter?
Well, and I'm not a songwriter, but I've been around a lot and I listen to what they say. And it's like you have to have a hook. You've got to get into what the song is about. And so many people want to, like I said, they'll do like a whole instrumental intro, but you're really going to have only that 60 seconds. So you've got to hook them within 60 seconds. And that's, if you're in writing, it's about 150 words. You can get a lot in 60 seconds, but that's just vital to just get that hook going. I mean, if you name the song that, if you don't mention a Yellow Brick Road until the last 30 seconds of the song, they're confused.
That's right. Yeah. And I feel like it's kind of a twofold hook. Like oftentimes when we're in the studio, when the artist, we're searching for that melodic hook. But I think it's also, especially when you're dealing with Americana or country, it's the story hook too. Like, give me a reason in that first verse to keep listening, because I want to hear the moment unfold, or the story, or this person's journey, or whatever it is unfold a little bit. So yeah, that's great advice, Melissa. Wonderful, wonderful advice. So Melissa, we've been teasing it the whole episode, this Mississippi Songwriter of the Year. Tell our listeners a little bit about how that competition originated and what you guys do with it.
Well, we began that in 2017 with the hopes of taking all the creative songwriters and everybody and throughout the state and keeping that rich history that we have in Mississippi. And that's called Mississippi Songwriter of the Year because you have to be from Mississippi. And we started that. My dad actually went on a trip to Muscle Shoals and started talking to some pretty accomplished songwriters and musicians up there, and just realized, when it's all said and done, the songwriter is really the hero. Even though they may not be the person performing the song, but they always own that song as long as they have the royalties for it. And so every good song it's not because of the performer, it's because of the songwriter. So we started Mississippi Songwriter of the Year and have met some absolutely incredible artists, love watching their journeys and doing things for them. So we're getting ready to open our applications for 2023, March 1st.
Nice. It's perfect timing.
It is.
And what are some of the incentives for an artist to be a part of this? So, I mean, I think it's great to have that moniker of like, I'm the Mississippi Songwriter of the Year. But yeah, are there some prizes or some incentives that come along with that?
Yes. So this year we're changing up our prize package a little bit to kind of tailor it to what we see the artist that fits with the artist. But when we take the top 15 will perform in front of a live panel of judges on June 24th at Marty Stewart's Congress of Country Music Ellis Theater in Philadelphia. That's where we're going to have it.
That's brand new, right?
Yeah, brand new. Super excited about that. And I think Marty Stewart, I spoke with him while I was looking at the venue the other day, and he seemed excited about having it there because he's about, Mississippi music. And the winner this year will receive a $1,000 scholarship, if you will, to any studio of their choice to produce any song of their choice. And we will also take them to Muscle Shoals because we have a big tie-in up there and show them some of the cool stuff that's gone on in Fame Studio 3614. And they will get to sit down with some accomplished songwriters that have written hits and just kind of have like a Q&A session. Like, what can I do to, make this song better? Or, what is the format of a hit and all that stuff. So we do that kind of thing. And then we spend the next year promoting any events they have going on, trying to get them some gigs with people that we're tied into. Last year, our songwriter went down to the Mississippi Songwriters Festival in Ocean Springs and did a set down there, which was really cool because we were close with those guys. And then he was at the state fair and did some stuff like that. So we just use any connections we have to grow that songwriter.
That's great, Melissa. And thank you guys for doing what you're doing. I'm going to try to talk you in off air to keeping everybody away from Muscle Shoals as a producer here in Jackson. No, I'm kidding. I know there's so much great history.
Well, and we do the Muscle Shoals things not because for the recording studios or anything, but to show you what kind of history comes from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what you really can accomplish in music. And like I said earlier, I was talking to you before we started that my husband's a musician and we were discussing it the other day. And, we're looking into some different things for him. And there's just so many opportunities out there, but you kind of have to be self-motivated. You have to be driven and you do have to have a certain level of talent. And sometimes it's hard to tell people like, you don't have it. But
sure.
It happens.
And hopefully you don't have to be, because that's no fun to have that conversation with anyone.
But I mean, you do have to be aware of what is good.
And kind of along that lines, as we wrap up, Melissa, and we're going to let you in a moment, just kind of give people a way to reach out to you and find out more about the Songwriter of the Year competition. But you have seen so many successful artists over the years. Growing up in this industry, like that's such a cool advantage. One of my favorite questions I've asked people over the years is, what are the threads that you've seen between those successful artists, between those artists who are maybe just as talented as some other people, but they somehow made it? Anything stand out to you?
I'm trying to think because I'm thinking back to like remembering when, George Strait and Reba McEntire, their big venues was the Mississippi Coliseum. And obviously now we know that's not even a big venue. And just seeing how these artists, but it's persistence. I mean, that is the only word that you could use everybody was persistent. And I watched my songwriters that have been our Mississippi songwriters in the past, and I watched their persistence. And it's like my husband uses this all the time with his guitar students: hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And that is so true because they want it. In order for you do have to keep driving and be self-motivated and want it more than this person next to you, really.
Yeah, that's great, Melissa. Well, thank you for your time today. For our listeners that would like to enter the competition or find out more about Boswell Media, give them a call to action.
Well, you can always email me at Melissa Boswell at boswellmedia.net, MELISSA, BOSWELL at boswellmedia.net. Or for more information about Mississippi Songwriter of the Year, you can go to our website, mssongwriteroftheyear.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Melissa.
Thank you, Casey. Look forward to talking to you.
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Blue Sky Studios podcast. Have a great day, everyone.